The blazing June sun beat down relentlessly on the concrete courtyard of the downtown county courthouse. I stood motionless on the front steps. In my hands was the final divorce decree, stamped with the raised seal of a judge. The paper was paper-thin and weightless, yet it encapsulated 5 blind, wasted years of my youth. The printer ink still carried a sharp, bitter scent. I gently ran my finger over the line bearing my name and the name of the man who used to share my bed. Victoria Price and Tyler Jenkins. As of this exact moment, those 2 names officially belonged to strangers. Or, more accurately, to sworn enemies. 5 years ago, I was the beloved daughter of the chairman of Price Enterprises. Blinded by love and defying my family's warnings, I had cried and begged on my knees in front of my father, tears streaming down my face, swearing that Tyler was a kind, ambitious man who only lacked a launching pad to shine. My father looked at me back then with eyes full of heartbreak and helplessness. He sighed, his hair seeming to turn a few shades grayer in an instant. Finally, out of love for his only daughter who had lost her mother at a young age, he closed his eyes and nodded. He allowed Tyler to step through the doors of wealth without demanding a prenuptial agreement or any conditions. But little did I know that my father's heartbroken nod back then was the beginning of a tragedy where I would be hollowed out and exploited to the bone. The sharp clicking of leather shoes on the tile floor interrupted my thoughts. From the courthouse hallway, Tyler walked out. He was wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit, a birthday gift I had bought him last year that cost as much as an average worker's annual salary. His hair was slicked back, and his face radiated an unconcealed, smug satisfaction. Clinging to his arm was Mia, his young mistress, wearing a tight, bright red dress and carrying a designer handbag paid for entirely by my supplementary platinum card. They walked side by side, looking less like people walking out of a broken marriage and more like people who had just hit the lottery jackpot. Well, this is done, so we go our separate ways from now on. Don't bother hating me. When the feelings are gone, we just set each other free, Tyler said callously, a half-smile curling on his lips. I looked up at the man standing before me. The straight nose, the bright eyes, the gentle, scholarly exterior that had deceived my entire youth now clearly displayed a chilling shamelessness. My throat tasted like ash, but I did not cry. My tears had dried up during the countless sleepless nights waiting for my husband to come home, during the times I caught his sickeningly sweet text messages with dozens of other women. Mia leaned against Tyler's shoulder, her shrill voice ringing out across the sun-drenched courtyard. Victoria, Tyler is right. You have money and power, but you just don't know how to keep a man. A man needs a woman who is soft and obedient, not some bossy spinster who always acts superior. Go home, hug your piles of money, and live a lonely life. I calmly placed the divorce decree into my handbag, the clasp snapping shut with a decisive click. Looking straight into Mia's eyes, I replied in the calmest tone possible. You picked up the trash I threw away, and you think you struck gold? Keep it and use it carefully. Tyler's face darkened. He took a step forward, his voice turning into a low growl. Don't be so arrogant. Do you really think your family's Price Enterprises is still intact? You stepped back to play housewife for the past few years. Do you even know who holds the real power in the company now? Your dad is old and senile. With my seat as the chief operating officer, plus all the loyal people my mother carefully placed in key departments, do you honestly think you can just get a divorce and kick us out? The roots run deep. If you try to pull them up, you will only drag the entire corporation down to ruin. Tyler burst into arrogant laughter, the sound echoing against the yellowed walls of the courthouse. He was blindly confident. He firmly believed that for the past 5 years, my turning a blind eye to him, bringing dozens of his relatives into lucrative positions like the purchasing department, accounting, and project management was because I was stupid and hopelessly in love. His mother, Carol, a woman who came from a working-class flea market background, always acted sweet and humble in front of me, but behind my back, she was secretly colluding with dummy corporations to siphon money out of Price Enterprises. They thought I was blind. They thought I was deaf. They failed to understand that even when a tiger is lying still and sleeping, its nature is still the apex predator of the jungle. Let us see how deep your ugly roots really go. I turned and walked away without bothering to look back. The sun shone directly into my eyes, blindingly bright but also incredibly clear. It was time for me to clean up the garbage I had brought into my own home. It was time for this unfilial daughter to return and apologize to her father. I slid into the driver's seat of my familiar Range Rover, rolling up the windows tightly to completely block out the noise of the city. The space inside the car was so quiet I could clearly hear my own heartbeat. I unlocked my phone, my fingers swiping through thousands of photos in my album, the glamorous wedding photos taken in Europe, the pictures of Tyler smiling gently, feeding me soup when I was sick, the photos of a happy enter gathered family in the mansion where I had personally paid for every single piece of furniture. All of it had once been things I cherished like treasures. Without a single moment of hesitation, I pressed the button to delete them all. The system prompted, "Are you sure you want to permanently delete?" I smiled bitterly and pressed delete. The screen flashed once, and over 5,000 moments of lies vanished without a trace. It was exactly like cutting out a malignant tumor. At the moment of the incision, the pain cuts straight to your soul, but if you do not cut it out, it will metastasize and kill you. I scrolled to a familiar phone number saved as Dad. For nearly 3 years, the number of calls between him and me could be counted on one hand. Every time I called, he would ask a few brief questions and then use work as an excuse to hang up. I knew he was angry with me. He was angry because I defended my husband's family too much. Angry because I let them abuse their power in the company he had built with his own blood and sweat. My finger trembled. I took a deep breath and pressed call. It rang 3 times before the other end picked up. A familiar dry cough echoed, breaking my heart. "Victoria, honey." His voice was deep and raspy, carrying the heavy exhaustion of old age. Just those 3 words. The wall of pride and strength I had been trying to wear shattered completely. Hot tears welled up and rolled down my cheeks. My voice cracked, entirely broken. "Dad, I was wrong. I was so wrong." The line went silent for a beat. There was no scolding. There was no "I told you so." There was only a soft, emotional sigh, the forgiving comfort of a father. "I know. The court decision is finalized, right? Cry it out, honey. Cry to lighten your heart. I am right here. Our family is still right here. No one can ever hurt you again." I rested my head against the steering wheel, sobbing like a toddler. All the resentment, all the suffocating humiliation of the past 5 years poured out entirely. I told him about Tyler's betrayal, about the shamelessness of Carol's family, about how they had planned to take over the company. My father listened to everything, only occasionally offering a soft hum of acknowledgement. When I finally calmed down and wiped my tears dry, my father's voice suddenly turned steel-hard. It was the authoritative echo of the chairman who had survived the cutthroat corporate world for decades. "The daughter of Richard Price cannot be brought down by petty thieves. You have finished cleaning up your house, now it is time to clean up the company. I gathered enough evidence of their crimes a long time ago. I was just waiting for you to give the nod. I did not want you to be trapped between your love for him and your loyalty to me." So he had known everything all along. He was only waiting for me to wake up on my own. An overwhelming sense of gratitude and extreme remorse surged in my chest. I sat up straight, wiping away the last tears clinging to my eyelashes. I looked toward the distant glass skyscraper of Price Enterprises. My voice regained its cold, decisive edge. "Dad, I will personally be at the office at 2 p.m. today. Please notify Tom, the VP of Human Resources, and Marcus, the head of corporate security, to be ready. Furthermore, before I step into the main boardroom, all system access for Tyler and his relatives must be frozen. Their elevator keycards must be deactivated. Done. I'll have my people executed immediately. Let us show them exactly what the price of greed looks like." My father hung up. I started the car, the engine roaring powerfully to life. I turned the air conditioning to the max, letting the freezing air completely clear my mind. "Tyler, you were right. Your roots have planted themselves very deep. But you forgot one thing. I am the owner of this soil. I will dig up the earth, tear everything out by the core, and toss it all off my family's property. The purge officially begins. At exactly 2:00 p.m., I stepped out of my car, parked right at the main entrance of Price Tower. It had been a very long time since I appeared here in my capacity as the heir. I wore a tailored, pitch-black women's suit, my hair pinned up neatly, my black high heels clicking a steady, authoritative rhythm on the polished granite floor. The receptionists and security guards standing in the lobby all jolted slightly, rushing to bow their heads in greeting. The atmosphere instantly became strangely quiet and tense. I walked straight into the private executive elevator reserved for the chairman, swiping the highest-level access card that I had kept locked in the bottom of a drawer for 5 years. The numbers on the digital display climbed rapidly, taking me straight to the 40th floor, home to the executive boardroom. Right now, through the double-paned soundproof glass doors, I could clearly see the scene inside. Carol, Tyler's mother, was sitting triumphantly in the leather chair exclusively meant for the vice chairman. Surrounding her were her relatives who had been planted in the company, along with a few directors from the dummy corporations she had set up. She was wearing a flashy red velvet outfit, sporting a pearl necklace with beads the size of her thumb, talking and laughing nonstop. I signaled to Tom, the HR director, and 6 corporate security officers waiting outside. Then, with one hand, I forcefully pushed open the heavy oak doors. The door swung open with a loud, dry thud, cutting off all the boisterous laughter inside. Every eye darted toward the door. The smile on Carol's face froze solid. She squinted at me, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation, raising her voice condescendingly. "Victoria, what are you doing here at this hour? This is a high-level executive meeting. You are disrupting the leadership's work. Whatever it is, we will talk about it when you get home." She was still playing the role of the model mother-in-law, using her seniority to lecture me. I did not bother to answer. Taking slow, powerful steps, I walked straight to the head of the conference table. I slammed a thick stack of files down onto the glass surface. The loud bang made her relatives jump in their seats. "Carol, you seem to have forgotten a basic fact. At home, you may have been my mother-in-law, but in this building, I am the daughter of Chairman Richard Price, the second largest shareholder of this corporation. And starting this morning, on legal paper, your son and I no longer have any ties whatsoever." I announced loudly and clearly, my eyes sharp as knives sweeping over their rapidly paling faces. Carol shot up from her chair, her face flushing red with rage. "What are you talking about? Divorce? Tyler hasn't said a word to me. You think just because you have money you can kick this family out? Let me tell you, Tyler has been running this company for years. All the partner contracts are in his hands. You kick him out, and this company collapses instantly." I let out a cold laugh, shaking my head in disgust at the greed and sheer ignorance of the woman. "Whether the company collapses or not is none of your concern." Tom read the directive. Tom, the silver-haired VP of Human Resources who had followed my father since his early startup days, stepped forward solemnly. He cleared his throat, opened the folder in his hands, and read every word clearly and deliberately. Based on the directive of the chairman of the board, and citing irrefutable evidence of financial violations and professional misconduct, the Department of Human Resources officially announces the immediate and emergency suspension of Tyler Jenkins, Chief Operating Officer, Samuel Jenkins, Director of Purchasing, Catherine Jenkins, Chief Accountant, and 15 other directly affiliated individuals. All access to data systems, corporate bank accounts, and building keycards was frozen 15 minutes ago. Furthermore, all active contracts with 6 third-party companies showing evidence of fraudulent billing will be frozen pending a federal criminal investigation. Every word from Tom was like a sledgehammer smashing into the skulls of the people sitting in the boardroom. Carol's complexion shifted from red to a ghostly pale. Her legs trembled, unable to hold her weight, forcing her to grip the armrest of her chair tightly. Tyler's uncles and cousins began to panic. Some pulled out their phones to make calls, others opened their laptops. But it was all useless. Their screens were already displaying bright red error messages. "You dare do this to my family? You bridge-burning, ungrateful brat?" Carol pointed her finger right at my face, screaming hysterically, losing all the fake aristocratic elegance she had displayed just moments before. I stepped closer, leaning down to her eye level, enunciating every single word clearly. "Open your eyes, Carol. I endured your family for 5 years, gave you food to eat, gave you clothes to wear. That is called charity. But you people wanted to smash the pot and drain Price Enterprises dry. That is called embezzlement. That is called theft. Security. Escort all unauthorized personnel out of the building. From today on, if anyone with the last name Jenkins steps foot on company property, call the police immediately for trespassing." 6 burly security guards instantly stepped forward. They acted politely but with absolute resolve. They pulled chairs out, packed up belongings, and ordered Carol's relatives out the door. Screams, curses, and loud crying echoed across the entire floor. I stood with my arms crossed, calmly watching the people who had sucked the blood of my family being herded out the door like a kicked hornet's nest. A breeze from the ventilation system brushed against my face, carrying the cool chill of freedom. Everything was just beginning. The price they would have to pay for their bottomless greed and cruelty was still waiting ahead. A sudden summer afternoon rainstorm hit. The rain lashed violently against the glass windows of a coffee shop hidden deep in a small alleyway downtown. This used to be a familiar hideout for Tyler and me back when we both had nothing. It was where we used to sip cheap black diner coffee and paint countless illusions about a happy future home. I chose to sit in the darkest corner, gently stirring my black coffee without sugar, letting the bitter taste slide down my throat. Today, he was the one who texted me, begging me to meet him here one last time so he could apologize. Even though my heart had grown as cold as ice, I decided to come, not because I had any lingering feelings, but because I wanted to personally and permanently end the cheap theatrical play this man was still trying to stage. At exactly 4 p.m., Tyler pushed the door open and walked in. He looked completely different from the boastful, slicked-back man in the designer suit at the courthouse just a few days ago. He looked absolutely pathetic. His hair was a mess falling over his forehead, and his dress shirt was wrinkled and untucked. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, looking as though he had been awake for days. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, his hands clasped tightly together on the table, his shoulders trembling. If the version of me from a year ago saw my husband looking this exhausted, my heart would have tightened in pain. I would have rushed to hold his hand and asked him what was wrong. But now, sitting across from me was just a stranger, a terrible actor trying to salvage the last bit of profit from a marriage he had personally destroyed. "Victoria, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong." Tyler spoke in a hoarse voice, tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. He reached out, trying to touch my hand, but I quickly pulled away. My eyes stared straight through him, as sharp and cold as a blade. Tyler froze, swallowed hard, and continued his tearful monologue. Being kicked out of the company these past few days finally woke me up. That girl, Mia, she was just using me for my money. When she saw I had nothing left, she packed up all my valuables and ran off with someone else. I know I am a terrible person. I betrayed your kindness. I betrayed your father's expectations. But Victoria, we were married for 5 years. We shared a life together. I beg you, please, ask your dad to give me one more chance to start over. I don't need the executive title anymore. Let me just be a regular employee. Just let me stay by your side and make it up to you. I listened to him cry in silence, the corners of my mouth curling into a smile of ultimate bitterness. It turns out the shamelessness of human beings really has no limits. I reached down, unzipped my handbag, and slowly pulled out a small digital voice recorder and a thin, carefully clipped file. I pushed them across the table toward Tyler. "Wipe your tears, Tyler. You can stop acting. There are no cameras here, and no audience is going to hand you an award." My voice was flat, carrying not a single ounce of anger, yet it made the man across from me shiver. I pressed play on the recorder. From the tiny speaker, Mia's flirtatious voice rang out clearly, mixed with Tyler's arrogant laughter. "You've been so amazing lately, getting that mansion out of that old hag. Once we finish gutting the corporation, let's just move overseas together." Immediately following was the voice of my ex-husband, the same voice that used to promise me the moon and the stars. "Don't worry, Victoria is so stupid. She's so obsessed with me, she does whatever I say." The old man is senile. I already secretly copied the entire core client database from Price Enterprises over to my mom's dummy corporation. Once this big score is done, I'll kick that bitch to the curb and bring you home like a queen. The recording ended. A terrifying silence swallowed the space, leaving only the sound of rain drumming against the window. Tyler's face went from flush red to bone white. His lips trembled violently, stuttering nonsensically. The tears on his face had dried up completely. He frantically grabbed the file I had handed him and flipped it open. Inside were screenshots of his text messages orchestrating the theft of proprietary technology, along with financial documents proving he had secretly embezzled funds from major corporate projects. "For 5 years, I loved you so much, I defied my own father. I blindly believed you were a good man. I indulged you. I tolerated your mother. I turned a blind eye so you could bring your relatives into the company. But what I got in return was not just physical infidelity. I got a malicious plot to steal my family's blood, sweat, and tears." I leaned forward, emphasizing every word. "Do you really think a few crocodile tears can whitewash grand larceny and corporate fraud? I have already sent a copy of this file to the federal authorities. Going to civil court for a divorce was just the first step. Where you and your family belong is behind the cold iron bars of a federal prison." Tyler stumbled backward as he stood up, his wooden chair slamming loudly against the wall. He looked at me with panicked eyes. Every trace of the begging victim was gone, exposing the true nature of a coward backed into a corner. "You dare be this ruthless? Aren't you afraid society will judge you as a cruel woman who drove her ex-husband to ruin?" I calmly stood up, grabbed my umbrella from the corner of the table, and left a $50 bill to pay for the untouched coffees. Society doesn't pay my bills. Their judgment won't make me poor or kill me. But if I tolerate a rabid, backstabbing dog like you, then I truly commit a sin against my aging father. Hire a lawyer, Tyler. My attorneys will be in touch. I walked out of the coffee shop, blending into the white curtain of rain. The chill of the rainwater hit my face, but inside my heart, I felt strangely light and peaceful. The final tumor had been completely excised. The late summer sun was still sweltering, casting harsh rays onto the massive granite plaza in front of the main entrance to Price Tower. The clock struck exactly 8 a.m., the time when thousands of employees hurried to swipe their badges for their shifts. It was also the exact moment a chaotic mob suddenly arrived, shattering the usual professional atmosphere. Leading the mob was none other than Carol, my former mother-in-law, along with dozens of familiar faces from the Jenkins family, from young to old. They were wearing wrinkled, shabby clothes, a far cry from the luxurious, polished appearances they had while lounging in corporate offices just a few days ago. In their hands, they unfurled bright red cardboard signs with glaring yellow letters. Price Enterprises robs the working class. Billionaires crushing good people. Give our family back our justice. A cheap megaphone blared static noise, blending with the screaming and theatrical crying of the Jenkins women, turning the plaza into a chaotic circus. Curious pedestrians stopped their cars, filming and taking photos, completely jamming a section of the avenue. Marcus, the head of corporate security, was running around sweating profusely. He frantically radioed me for permission to call the police and disperse the crowd. Sitting in my office on the top floor, I calmly watched the cheap theater play unfolding on the security monitors. A cold smile tugged at the corner of my lips. I picked up the radio and gave a clear command. Marcus, don't call the police just yet. Open the main doors wide. Invite Carol's entire family into the main lobby. Make sure to have bottled water ready for them. We will handle this openly and transparently in front of all our employees and the public. When I stepped off the elevator into the grand lobby, the Jenkins family mob was sitting all over the expensive leather sofas, their mouths still spewing vulgar curses. Seeing me appear in my authoritative suit, a few of the relatives looked intimidated and shrank back. But not Carol. The woman who had played the loving mother for years charged straight at me, pointing her finger right in my face. She shrieked, "You vicious daughter-in-law, you burn bridges! My family sacrificed for this company, working ourselves to the bone for years. Now you divorce Tyler and throw my entire family out onto the street with nothing. Today, I am going to let this whole city know the true, evil face of the Price family." I stood with my hands clasped behind my back, maintaining a safe distance, letting her scream until she went hoarse. Employees were standing in circles, whispering. Some looked doubtful, while others frowned in disgust at the mob's lack of class. When the room finally quieted down because Carol was exhausted, I slowly spoke up. My voice echoed clearly across the grand lobby through a lapel microphone. "Carol, you say your family sacrificed and worked yourselves to the bone? Excellent. Since your entire extended family is here today, along with pedestrians taking videos, I will show everyone exactly how great your family's contributions truly were." I raised my hand in a signal. Instantly, the massive digital screen in the center of the lobby, usually used for real estate presentations, flared to life. Displayed on the screen were official bank statements with raised seals and highly magnified corporate contracts. Holding a remote presenter, I flipped through the documents, explaining loudly. "This is a materials procurement contract signed by Samuel Jenkins, Carol's biological brother and our former director of purchasing. The cost of materials was falsely inflated to 3 times the market rate. The difference of $1.5 million, as proven by this bank statement, was wired directly into the personal account of Catherine Jenkins, Carol's sister and our former chief accountant." The entire lobby gasped in shock. The whispers turned into furious criticism from the company employees. Carol's face turned from bright red to a sickening gray. Her legs wobbled, and she had to grab onto her brother Samuel's arm. But Samuel was currently sweating buckets, his face completely drained of blood. I didn't stop. I clicked to the next slide. My voice was like steel. "I am not done. Here is a list of 3 dummy corporations registered under the name of Quentin Jenkins, Carol's youngest brother. No office, no employees, yet every month they received massive payments for phantom services from Price Enterprises. The total amount your family has embezzled and stolen from us over the last 3 years is nearly $4 million. Did you really think you could use cardboard signs, crying, and playing the victim to cover up the fact that you robbed the blood, sweat, and tears of thousands of honest workers here?" Just as the Jenkins relatives started to panic, some backing away and others trying to run, the wail of police sirens echoed from the street. Several squad cars slammed on their brakes in front of the lobby. Federal detectives and uniformed officers marched inside, holding thick stacks of warrants. The lead detective loudly read the charges, arresting Samuel Jenkins, Catherine Jenkins, and Quentin Jenkins for grand larceny, embezzlement, and corporate fraud. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked shut around the wrists of the very people who had just been loudly demanding justice. The relatives who had come to hold the protest signs threw their props on the ground in a panic and scattered to the sides, pale-faced and terrified into absolute silence. Carol watched her own siblings get hauled away. Her eyes rolled back, her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the cold marble floor. She wailed incoherently, but no one bothered to give her an ounce of sympathy. Her bottomless greed had dug the grave that buried her own family. The luxury suburban estate where my father lived usually maintained a rare, peaceful quiet away from the noisy city. Bougainvillea bloomed vibrantly under the afternoon sun, hiding the lush green lawns inside. But that peace was violently torn apart late that afternoon. Unwilling to accept that her siblings were locked up and her son was on the verge of federal prison, Carol resorted to the most despicable, toxic tactic she had left: psychological manipulation using her own flesh and blood. She dragged her two young grandchildren, 10-year-old Dylan and 6-year-old Hannah, right to the wrought iron gates of the Price estate. Under the sweltering heat radiating off the asphalt, she forced the two innocent children to kneel on the hard ground. Worse yet, hanging around the neck of each scrawny child was a cardboard sign with scribbled words: Grandpa Richard, Aunt Victoria, please forgive our dad. Please save our family. Carol slumped next to them, her hair a mess, constantly pinching the children's legs to make them cry louder to attract the attention of the wealthy neighbors. Sitting in the living room with my father, watching this tear-soaked scene through the security cameras, my heart clenched in sharp pain. How could a woman who called herself a grandmother be cruel enough to drag her own flesh and blood into the blistering sun, using them as human shields to beg for mercy? My father, Chairman Richard Price, a man who had tasted all the bitter and sweet realities of the business world, gripped his wooden cane tightly. Blue veins bulged on his aged hands, and his face burned red with rage. He let out a heavy breath, leaned on his cane to stand up, and spoke in a deep, undeniable tone of authority. Victoria, open the gates. They have brought this to our front door. The Price family does not cower and hide. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its own cubs. If a human being can be this evil, heaven itself won't forgive it. The heavy iron gates slowly swung open. Neighbors had already started gathering, pointing and whispering. My father walked out, his frame thin but standing as straight and sturdy as a pine tree. He didn't even look at Carol, who was rolling on the ground faking her sobs. He walked straight toward the two children. He bent down, his wrinkled hands trembling as he held the shaking shoulders of little Hannah, then looked straight into Dylan's eyes. Carol, get up on your feet, right now. My father's shout carried massive authority, striking like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, silencing the murmuring crowd instantly. Carol jumped, stopped crying, and looked up at him with swollen eyes. My father struck his cane hard against the pavement. Because of your adult greed, because of your dirty, stolen money, you have the heart to drag the dignity and pride of these two children out here to be trampled on? Who are you making them kneel to? Are they begging me to forgive a crime? The crimes of your son and your siblings will be judged by the law. These children are innocent. They are not human shields for your cowardice. Carol stuttered, trying to salvage the last bit of her pride in front of the crowd. You are cruel. My grandchildren are losing their father. My family is ruined. All because your daughter is a jealous, heartless bitch. You rich people are cold-blooded. But before she could finish, something unexpected happened that stunned everyone, including my father and me. Dylan, the 10-year-old boy who was usually quiet and withdrawn, suddenly stood up. His young face was soaked with tears and smeared with dirt, but his eyes radiated a fierce resilience, profound pain, and ultimate humiliation. He looked at the neighbors recording on their phones, then looked down at the cardboard sign hanging around his neck. With an explosive burst of anger, Dylan grabbed the string with both hands and snapped it. He threw the cardboard sign violently onto the ground and stomped on it. Grandma, don't make me kneel anymore. I feel so humiliated. The boy's voice cracked, tearing through the suffocating air. He turned, pulled his little sister Hannah to her feet, took the sign off her neck, and threw it away. Dylan gripped his sister's hand tightly, looking at Carol with eyes full of the bottomless disappointment of a deeply wounded child. My teacher says if you do something wrong, you take the punishment. Dad did something wrong, he has to take responsibility. You told me to come here to apologize for Dad, but making us wear these signs and be a joke for people. I won't do it. You go home. I am never getting on my knees to beg anyone ever again. With that, Dylan held his sister's hand and resolutely walked away through the crowd. His small but unbreakable silhouette cast a long shadow on the sunlit road. Carol was rooted to the spot, covering her face, sobbing in bitter, delayed regret. Her final move, using morality to choke my family, had been kicked to pieces by her own grandson, teaching her a lesson in self-respect. My father stood watching the children until they disappeared down the road. His eyes glistened with sorrow. He let out a long, heavy sigh, turned around, and walked back into the house, leaving the woman collapsed in the middle of the ruins created by her own greed. The late afternoon sun cast long, pale shadows across the wide courtyard of the estate, illuminating a pathetic, miserable scene. After the resilient figures of the two children vanished around the corner, the curious crowd began to disperse, leaving only the Jenkins family standing around looking at each other in confusion. The curtain on their tragedy had been ripped open by children, exposing their absolute shame. Right at that moment, a passenger van pulled up to the gate. David Jenkins, Tyler's uncle, who had just been fired from his project management job that morning, led a large group of angry relatives out of the vehicle. Their faces were red with murderous rage, completely stripping away the submissive, flattering behavior they usually showed Carol. David stomped over and pointed directly at Carol's face as she sat on the ground. His loud voice shattered the silence. "Carol, what the hell did you do?" This morning the whole family was sitting at our desks, and suddenly security comes up, packs our stuff, and herds us out onto the street like ducks. They said your family embezzled and committed fraud. What is the meaning of this? You told us to come work here so we could all enjoy the wealth, and now we've lost our livelihoods. How are you going to fix this? Carol scrambled to stand up. Her clothes were a mess, her sweat mixing with her tears, ruining her makeup. She stuttered, trying to hold onto the last shred of authority she had as the head of the family. "David, calm down. Let's figure this out. It's Victoria, she's burning bridges. She's jealous, so she fired all of us. I'm panicking too. 3 of my siblings were just arrested by the feds. How can you come here and yell at me right now?" A middle-aged woman, one of Tyler's aunts, sneered and cut her off, her eyes sharp with contempt. "Jealous? Stop lying through your teeth, Carol." This morning in the lobby, they put a massive bank statement right on the screen. Millions of dollars in material markups, fake companies. You and your 3 siblings swallowed it all whole. Did any of us at the bottom see a single penny of it? We broke our backs working as your shields. And now that it blew up, you want us to take the fall for you? Hearing about the millions of dollars, the crowd of relatives exploded in outrage. A barrage of curses rained down like a broken beehive. The fake unity, the sweet words of brother and sister built purely on the foundation of material benefit, shattered into dust. Human nature, when backed into a corner and stripped of money, reveals itself in the most brutal and honest way. David stepped forward, grabbing Carol by the collar of her expensive velvet top, grinding his teeth. "Pay us our compensation. My whole family moved to the city relying on this job to feed our kids. Now my background check is blacklisted. Who is going to hire me? You swallowed millions. Now spit it out and pay us for our damages, or I swear to God I will destroy you." Standing on the second-floor balcony looking down, I quietly watched their internal civil war unfold. I felt no pity, only a bitter realization of what happens to people whose minds are blinded by greed. They used to rely on each other to bleed my family dry. Now, with the gold mine cut off, they were ready to tear each other to pieces. Tyler stood cowering in a corner, his face pale, his eyes darting in terror at the aggression of his uncles and aunts, people he usually looked down on. The wealth and power he had plotted so hard to steal had turned to ash, burning away the last shreds of his tattered family ties. The chaos at the gate showed no signs of stopping. Carol's wails mixed with David's vulgar shouting, creating an agonizing, deafening noise. I took a deep breath, adjusted my jacket, and slowly walked down the stairs. My father was sitting on the wooden sofa, rolling a half-empty cup of hot tea in his hands. He gave me a slight nod, signaling me to do what needed to be done. His eyes radiated absolute trust. I signaled Marcus, the head of security, to open the iron gates once more, directly facing the out-of-control mob. My appearance made the crowd freeze instantly. The hands grabbing Carol's collar quickly dropped. I stepped onto the porch, carrying an imposing aura, my eyes sweeping over the haggard, fearful faces of the Jenkins family. I spoke in a calm, even tone that wasn't loud but carried enough weight to crush any resistance. "Are you done making a scene? This is private residential property. I have every right to call the police and have you arrested for disturbing the peace. But considering we used to have some ties, I am giving you one last chance to end this quietly." I glanced over Tyler's panicked face, then locked eyes with David, stating clearly, "I know very well that some of you here were not actually involved in the embezzlement ring run by Carol and her 3 siblings. You were just victims used as a smokescreen. Price Enterprises is a place of rules, but also of humanity. For anyone who did not break the law, I will personally instruct HR to pay out your full salary for this month, plus severance pay according to the law. Furthermore, the company will issue clean letters of recommendation so you can find new jobs." I paused for a beat to let those words sink in, then dropped the final psychological blow. "But that offer is only for those who leave this property right now and voluntarily cut all ties with the people currently being investigated by federal authorities. If anyone wants to stay here and defend Carol and terrorize my home, be my guest. Tomorrow morning, your employee files will be sent directly to the federal investigators to expand the probe into accomplices." My words were like a bucket of ice water dousing the aggressive fire of the mob, while throwing a single life preserver to drowning people. It didn't even take 10 seconds of thinking. David immediately took several steps back, waving his hands frantically. "Victoria, Miss Price, if you say that, we are relieved. We are just simple people. We didn't know anything. We were just tricked by Carol. We are leaving right now. Thank you for showing mercy." With that, he ordered the relatives to pile back into the passenger van. Not a single person bothered to look back at Carol even once. The van started up, blew a cloud of dark exhaust, and sped away, leaving a chilling silence on the concrete driveway. Carol sat slumped on the ground, her hair a chaotic mess, her eyes dead as she stared at the departing van. She mumbled incomprehensible words, like a madwoman who had just lost her entire world. Only then did Tyler dare to tentatively step forward and help his mother up, but instead of sympathy, his voice was filled with vicious resentment. "You see, Mom? This is all your fault. I told you to keep it quiet. Don't bring all these stupid relatives into the company. You were too greedy trying to grab everything. Now it blew up. I lost my wife. I lost my job, and you lost your money. You ruined my life, do you know that?" Carol froze, her bloodshot eyes staring at the precious son she had always been so proud of. The pent-up frustration finally exploded. She swung her arm, using all her strength to deliver a resounding slap across Tyler's grimacing face. The loud smack echoed sharply, leaving a red handprint on his cheek. "You unfilial bastard! Who do you think I did all these terrible things for? Wasn't it to gather enough money to start your own company? To pay for your young mistress? Now you are blaming all of this on your old mother?" Carol wailed in despair, her cries echoing in the late afternoon, closing the curtain on a tragicomedy of people who shared a bed but harbored different hearts, ultimately using their claws to tear each other apart. The collapse of the Jenkins family happened at a dizzying speed, like an ancient tree that had rotted from the inside, needing only a light breeze to snap completely. The next morning, while I was in my office reviewing backlogged contracts, my phone rang. The screen displayed the name of Attorney Mitchell, the corporation's legal counsel. His voice was steady but carried shocking news. "Victoria, last night, Tyler sneaked back into the corporate headquarters. He used a backup keycard that hadn't been deactivated yet to break into the server room. He was trying to steal the hard drives containing the core client database. Security caught him red-handed and handed him over to the police. The charges for corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets are ironclad." I dropped my pen onto the desk, leaned back in my leather executive chair, and let out a long sigh. He just couldn't accept defeat. He was still trying to thrash around in the mud pit he had dug himself into. Greed had completely blinded the logic of an educated man. He failed to understand a universal truth. Things that are not earned by your own blood, sweat, and tears can never be kept. Tyler's future would likely be spent behind cold iron bars, repenting for his mistakes and his cruelty. But the tragedy of that family did not stop there. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. On the other end was the trembling, submissive voice of Arthur Jenkins, Tyler's biological father. Unlike Carol, who was loud and ambitious, Arthur was a retired elementary school teacher who had spent his life keeping his head down, desperately protecting his fragile ego and his image of an educated family. Since the scandal broke, he had vanished entirely, never showing up to advise his wife or defend his son. He chose to hide to protect his own fake reputation. "Victoria, it's Arthur. I am calling to apologize to you and Richard." Arthur's voice hesitated, full of humiliation. "I spent my life teaching children. I never expected to be cursed with a ruined son and a greedy wife. I am calling to let you know. This morning, I officially filed for divorce from Carol. As for the small house in our hometown, I asked the court to clearly divide it so it doesn't get frozen by the feds. From now on, I have nothing to do with that woman or her son. Please be generous and do not report this to my old school, so I can keep a little face in front of my neighbors in my old age." Hearing those weak excuses, a wave of pity washed over me. Not pity for him, but pity for an idea of family that had been twisted to the extreme. When there was wealth and glory, they fought to enjoy it. When disaster struck, the man who was supposed to be the pillar of the family cowardly abandoned all responsibility, filing for divorce just to save his pension and his torn, fragile ego. A family with no moral foundation, no genuine sharing, and no love was always destined to shatter. I answered him with a tone that was firm but unyielding. "Arthur, the law is fair. Everyone pays for what they did. The authorities will not harass the innocent. I only hope that after all this, you find true peace in your soul, not a fake peace bought by abandoning your wife and child." I hung up, putting a permanent end to any remaining ties with the toxic Jenkins family. Dawn broke on the weekend with a crisp, chilly atmosphere. Today, I personally drove the old, faded silver sedan that my mother used to drive to the grocery store, taking my father toward Pine Hill Cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The winding road cut through rows of dark green pines. The wind whistled gently through the windows, carrying the earthy scent of wild grass and morning dew. It had been a very long time since my father and I had shared a car ride in such profound peace. My father wore a simple gray button-down shirt. His face bore the deep wrinkles of time and hardship, but today, his eyes were bright and unusually gentle. Parking at the bottom of the hill, my father and I carried a basket of fruit and flowers, slowly walking up the moss-covered stone steps. My mother's grave lay quietly beneath the shade of an ancient pine tree. The headstone bearing the name Margaret Price was still clear and serene. My father pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and meticulously wiped a few fallen dried leaves off the cold stone. His aged hands trembled, but they carried a love that had never gone cold. I placed a fresh bouquet of flowers and lit a small memorial candle. The smoke curled into the air, carrying away the burdens of the storms that had just passed, fading into the void. "Mom, your daughter came to see you today." I dropped the heavy burden. "Yours and Dad's company is safe, and I found myself again," I whispered to the grave. Warm tears rolled down my cheeks, but they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of liberation and growth. My father stood beside me, placing a hand on my thin shoulder. His warm voice echoed through the silence of the earth and sky. "Victoria, did you ever resent me? Did you blame me for knowing Tyler's family was no good, but still letting you marry him? Did you blame me for letting you swim in misery by yourself for 5 years?" I turned to look at him, shaking my head firmly, and threw my arms around his frail body. "No, Dad. I don't blame you. Thanks to your silence and your patience, I truly understand human nature now. I realized exactly what the heavy price of blind love is. If you had aggressively stopped me, or stepped in to save me too early, I probably would have spent my whole life as a child living in an illusion. I would never have developed the strength to take over our family's legacy." My father smiled. The gentle smile of a father who had used the rest of his life to forge a lesson written in blood for his child. An eagle that wants to spread its wings and fly high must break through its own thick shell. In this life, a person only truly grows up when they pick themselves up from their most painful falls. From now on, the past is closed. The road ahead belongs to you. Walk it with pride, and live a fearless life, my daughter. The wind swept through the pine forest, rustling like an answer from nature, and like the comforting embrace of a mother in heaven reaching out to a father. Ladies and gentlemen, dear readers, the story of Victoria ends here. After surviving so many storms, ultimately, kindness and self-respect remain the safest harbors for the human soul. This humble story, like a warm, comforting cup of tea, was meant to share a few simple truths with you. In family life, loving your children and grandchildren is sacred, but blind overprotection can sometimes be the poison that kills their future. Just like the father in this story, sometimes true love means taking a step back, swallowing the pain, and letting your child fall so they can stand back up and learn their own lessons. At the same time, this story is a profound reminder of the laws of the universe. Material wealth seized through scheming, bottomless greed, and betrayal will eventually slip through your fingers, leaving nothing but humiliation, shame, and a broken home. Only money earned through honest sweat and tears, and only genuine, selfless love are the priceless assets that will follow us to the end of our days. Wishing you all abundant health, and may your souls always remain peaceful and serene, so you can joyfully surround yourselves with your children and grandchildren, and enjoy your golden years to the absolute fullest. Thank you, and farewell.